Colonization in Reverse by Louise Bennett Coverley. Colonization in Reverse is one of the most iconic poems of Jamaica's most iconic woman poet, Louise Bennett Coverley. She was indeed a gifted poet. She made a phenomenal contribution to Jamaican literature and to the development of the Jamaican dialect of English, or as she would have loved to put it, Jamaica's nation language. She was much more than a mere poet. She was also a prose writer, a performer, a singer, a folklorist, and a teacher. She taught for some years in the University of West Indies. The title of the present poem, Colonization in Reverse, makes the subject matter of the poem very clear to the reader. The poem deals with colonization. Colonization is the political process by which one country conquers another country and converts that country into a colony. Between the 16th and the 18th centuries, or maybe between the 16th and the 19th centuries, European powers established colonies in Asia and Africa. The most important of these colonizing powers was, of course, Britain. Britain established colonies over vast tracts of Asia and Africa between the late 16th and the 19th centuries. In the early 20th century, it could be boasted that the sun would never set in the British Empire. To be more exact, in the early 20th century, approximately 1/4 of the land mass of the earth constituted the British Empire. This is colonization. But the subject matter of the poem is not colonization, it is reverse colonization. In 1947, the British granted independence to India and Pakistan. In the years that followed, country after country broke free from the British imperial yoke. The process of decolonization was both swift and systematic, and the British Empire thus came to an end. One of the countries colonized by the British was Jamaica. In the second half of the 20th century, people from the various former colonies of Britain, including Jamaica, started pouring into Britain. This is, in a way, reverse colonization. It is a fact that the demography of Britain has been changing dramatically over the decades, and that white Britons are becoming a minority in village after village, and town after town, and city after city in Britain. This process of reverse colonization is the subject of the poem. The poem opens on a note of excitement. The poet is extremely happy. She addresses the lines to Miss Matty, Miss Matty is obviously a fellow Jamaican. The poet is so happy that she fears that she might have a heart attack. She is so happy that it appears that her heart might burst. Thus the poem starts on a note of joy, of excitement, of exhilaration. What is the reason for this extreme happiness of the poet? There is good news. There is great news. What is the good news? What is the great news? Jamaicans are colonizing England. Once the English colonized Jamaica, but now Jamaicans are colonizing England. What is this but colonization in reverse? It is to be pointed out that the use of the term England is rather inaccurate here. The poet ought to have used Britain or even the United Kingdom. For one thing, it was the British who conquered the various regions of the world, not the English. For another, the Jamaicans are settling not merely in England, but also in Scotland, perhaps also in Wales, and also in Northern Ireland. But I suppose that Louise Bennett Coverley was not unduly concerned about such technicalities. Besides, we have to read the poem as a poem and not as a theory text. In the second stanza, the poet amplifies on what has already been said. There is a virtual exodus from Jamaica to England. Jamaicans move from Jamaica to England in the hundreds, in the thousands. They move from Kingston, which is the capital of Jamaica. They also move from the villages of Jamaica. Thus, urban Jamaicans as well as rural Jamaicans are migrating from Jamaica to England. They travel by plane from Jamaica to England. Those who cannot afford the plane fare travel by ship. Whatever be the means of travel, Jamaicans are determined to leave Jamaica and resettle in England. The poet declares, Jamaica is England bound. They are pouring from Jamaica into England. What is their aim? Their aim is to get good jobs in England. They would like to have rewarding professional careers in England. They are moving from Jamaica to England in order to get good jobs. The poet exclaims, "What an island, what a people." This line makes the attitude of the poet to England clear. It is an attitude of admiration. The poet is full of positive feelings towards England. What an island, what a beautiful island, what a people, what an excellent people. England is certainly worth settling in. This is the approach of the poet towards the host country. Men and women, young and old, are packing their bags and moving from Jamaica to England. It is a mass exodus. There is no doubt that history is being turned upside down. The poet admits that not all Jamaicans love to travel. There are certainly Jamaicans who love to remain in Jamaica. What do? They don't go to England. Instead, they open travel agencies so that they can facilitate the travel of footloose Jamaicans to England. Most Jamaicans travel to England. Those Jamaicans who do not love to travel to England start travel agencies. They even tempt the footloose Jamaicans with cheap fare offers. The point is that the entire population of Jamaica is working in unison to make the phenomenon of migration from Jamaica to England a grand success. The poet points out that the trend is gathering momentum with every passing week. With every passing week, the volume of travelers who leave Jamaica for England, who leave Jamaica for good, keeps increasing. This is a tendency which increases with every passing week. The people of Jamaica seem determined to populate and saturate England. England had once been the seat of the empire. Now the colonizer is being colonized. The people of Jamaica are pouring into England in order to colonize England. The poet feels that life is funny. There is tremendous irony in the situation. As I've already said, the colonizer has become the colonized, and the colonized has become the colonizer. Once the English came to Jamaica, they colonized Jamaica. Now the Jamaicans are moving to England and they are colonizing England. Money moved from the pockets of the Jamaicans to the English, to the pockets of the English once upon a time. Now money moves from the pockets of the English to the pockets of the Jamaicans. What is this but reverse colonization? Once the Jamaicans reach England, they will settle in their differing roles. They will find jobs for themselves. It has already been said that the main motive of the exodus of the Jamaicans from Jamaica to England is to find for themselves rewarding professional lives. But there may be some Jamaicans who are not able to find jobs for themselves. They will settle for the dole. What is the dole? The dole is a typical English or a typical British device. The dole is unemployment wage. The dole is the benefit given by the state to persons who are unable to find suitable jobs for themselves. The dole is unheard of in Jamaica. But in England, whoever is unemployed is eligible for the state benefit. Thus, many Jamaicans settle in England and find jobs for themselves. Others find satisfaction in receiving the dole. We are now introduced to a character called Jane. Who is Jane? Jane is obviously a Jamaican woman. She seems to be a young woman. She has moved from Jamaica to England. She explains that the dole is £2 a week. £2 a week is big money by Jamaican standards. Jane has moved from Jamaica to England. She is going to receive the dole. The dole is £2 a week. That is not very bad. That is big money from the Jamaican perspective. Jane is a typical young migrant from Jamaica to England. Jane will get £2 a week as long as she is unable to get a suitable job for herself. That is the dole which the British state gives to unemployed, the poet explains that Jane will never find a suitable job for herself. This is because she searches very vigorously for an appropriate job by sitting on Aunt Fan's couch and reading a romantic novel. It is true that as long as Jane does not land herself an appropriate job, the state will give her the dole. She will receive the dole as long as she does not find an appropriate job for herself. And the poet feels that Jane will never ever find a suitable job for herself because she searches for an appropriate job by sitting all day long in Aunt Fan's couch and reading a romantic novel. At the closure of the poem, the focus of the poem, the thematic focus of the poem shifts from Jamaica and Jamaicans to the host country, England. How does England take this phenomenon? The poet points out that England has a long and checkered history. The English faced war. They braved the worst. But the fact is that after the conquest of England in 1066 AD by William the Conqueror, no power has ever conquered England. That is, until now. The poet wonders how the English are going to cope with the phenomenon of reverse colonization. The English have faced everything, practically everything, that can be faced by a country in the course of a long history. But they are, for the first time, face to face with the actual conquest of their country by a colonizing power. Thus, the poem ends with a kind of question mark. The poet wonders how the English are going to manage this very new, unique, strange phenomenon of colonization in reverse. The poem consists of 11 stanzas of 4 lines each. The second line in each stanza rhymes with the last line. The language is Jamaican English. The diction is simple. The tone is conversational. The movement is fast-paced. On the whole, there is no doubt that colonization in reverse is an impressive piece of poetry. It is to be observed that the bitterness that one meets with in much of mainstream anti-colonial writing, such as the works of Frantz Fanon, is totally absent from the present poem. On the other hand, the poet appears to have very positive emotions towards the former colonizer of her country. The poem reminds us of the text authored by Bill Ashcroft and 2 others, titled "The Empire Writes Back." What is this but the empire writing back? The poem also reminds us of the Hollywood movie, "The Empire Strikes Back." The ontology is that of the empire striking back. The epistemology is that of the empire writing back. The phenomenon that is described in the poem is the empire striking back. The description of that phenomenon is certainly a case of the empire writing back.